Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Doug Fleener. He is the author of Start With What If? Weekly questions to spark immediate change and growth. That's launching on January 6th. He is a former director of retail for Bose and also a CEO of a national company. So we learn from him, about his powerful what if framework, how to reframe challenges, take action before confidence, and spark immediate growth in your personal and professional life. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, Doug. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about, learn from you about turning what if into what's next. We'll talk about your framework. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Well, first, I like to always joke that in high school, I could have been voted least likely to succeed. But actually I voted wittiest in my senior class, and it was all downhill after that. But I was a little bit, say, kind of a drifter, if you will, a little bit. I say I was a little bit of a quitter. I went to high school, went to college, dropped out of college. I was too busy partying, went into the boat business down in Florida, where I like to joke I was living my Jimmy Buffett song. And but it was down there where I, kind of hit the highs of owning my own business, and I hit the lows of losing that business. And I lost that business because of alcoholism and drug addiction. And it was there where I learned one of the things I've kind of learned in putting this book together, right, is that in moments of whether they're big moments or small moments, there's a change and there's a kind of an interruption, if you will, of our thinking, of our past actions, our reactions, the stories we tell ourselves. And in that moment, when I was in my late 20s and my life fell apart, I had a gentleman ask me once, he says, so what if you went just a day without a drink? And here I was, I had bankrupted a family business, really had hurt my father, who was my business partner. And, he asked, I'm thinking I got to rebuild my life. I got to find money. I got to find a job. I got to do all these things. And he just interrupted me and just said, well, what if you just did this today? And that ended up becoming kind of a huge moment for me. And I rebuilt my life from there. And I went to work for the Sharper Image, which was always fun in its heyday. And then I met a gentleman who was working for Bose Corporation. And we were in Boston, and Bose is right there in Framingham. And I just really, right time, right place, got a terrific job with Bose. It was a great career. And I was director of retail for Bose Corporation. There are many Bose stores in India, obviously, with Dr. Bose. And it was just a wonderful place to work. And but I decided to leave there and go out on my own, speaking and consulting in retail and leadership and personal growth. Since then, I went on, as you mentioned, I was the CEO of a national company, not something I was planning to do, but a client asked me to run his company during the pandemic. And so today I work with leaders, I work with individuals, I work with groups on really helping them see how they can change in the moment and how they can change their future with a very simple framework.
Absolutely, Doug. So we'll come to the book separately. I want to understand, a bit more related to it, but about the what if framework itself. Somebody told you, what if you left that thing for a day, and see how it works. So it means you are a good listener. People get advice all the time. They don't listen. And even if they listen, they find, that it's difficult to follow it. Many a times, when you are in a difficult state, when you have lost a lot of things, you don't listen. Perhaps you lose that power to listen. What made you listen, still be a listener of something that would change your life? How can people learn to be good listeners to good, not so called always advice, but good advice, and take that action? Help us understand, especially in today's time when there is so much of noise, every word, inward, outward, everywhere. You almost forget to listen. What made you listen? What is it that you want to tell about to people about listening nicely so that it can change your life? Then we'll come to the framework.
Well, and that's a great question. So, and I have to say, right at the moment where I didn't realize what had happened, right? I mean, I think, and that's part of when you're able to look back and see what it is, and but I think the thing that really was different for me is I was stuck kind of in this addiction. I was stuck in this routine. I was stuck in this way of living, and it was very chaotic. I was very dishonest, but I really didn't know any different, right? I mean, that was my life. And so I think the thing that has to happen is, and it's part of the framework, if you will, but I think it's the huge power of the pause. Just that moment, whether again, it's a big moment, it's a small moment, but really what that he did was, and I would just call it an interrupter, right? So he interrupted, if you will, what was happening in my life at that moment. And I think for people who are watching, again, whether it's something big going on in their life or maybe something career, what have you, it's really about, right? It's about the power of the pause. People are always thinking they need different answers and they need different things. And in my coaching and consulting, one of the things I find is that so often the answers are already within the person. What they haven't done is interrupted. They haven't stopped and paused. So, to answer the question, when something is going on, I have people just stop and pause. Just stop for a moment. And I think we can talk about it, but right, it's how you start your day. It's maybe what you do during your day. But so often, especially, when we're trying to juggle family, careers, the holidays, you name it, it's about finding those moments to just kind of stop and not only maybe ask a question, but ask a better question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sitting here, I can look at one thing that you listen to that, and then it's not a difficult thing to assess why you got into Bose Corporation, known for his audio and all. I coming from India, I start connecting things in a much more different way. God has his own way of doing things, Doug. But to understand one thing, in straightway from the ground itself, you are into coaching, consulting, speaking. And so, in that sense, and then we'll come to the book, is that what is it that people ask you about? What is it? Do they want to learn from how you rebuilt your life? Do they want to learn from your what if framework? Why? How much they have done it in their own life? What is it that keeps them stuck? How is it that you help these people at different ways? Different places, different stages of life. Tell us a bit from that ground moment.
Yeah, right. So I think it comes from two different points, right? So pain is right. The touchstone can be the touchstone of all growth, and right. So a lot of times they're feeling stuck. They're feeling some kind of pain, whether it's career wise, in a relationship, again, maybe just trying to juggle having a family and what have you, and so while pain can be the touchstone of all growth, pain can also be optional. Right. So I think it's one thing. So I would say people probably first come to me in trying to figure something out. And then what I like is that they stay because we can learn to look at how to move forward in different ways. Again, I use this what if, but most of the time people are spent looking backwards. And while looking backwards can be where our lessons are, it's about what do we do with those lessons to move forward. And So I think most people, especially say when in the consulting side, when I work with businesses, is they're stuck, but again, I think so often they know the answer, but what they're not doing is moving forward, right? And so it's really about taking the next action. I consulted with someone once, and I was visiting their location, and I was just kind of firing off ideas. And it was funny because by about the 10th idea, they had always said, well, we thought about that, or that won't work. And it was like, we just need to do something here. And so, I think when people are feeling stuck, right, I think we can have a tendency to overthink it. Right. And the more we think, sometimes the less we do. And so it's about taking action to move forward. And that, change only happens as a result of action. Excuse me. And the very last thing is I love to say, and I didn't think this up, but I've heard it, excuse me, is, we don't think our way into a new way of acting. We act our way into a new way of thinking. So
Wonderful.
You don't have to have the answers. You just have to take action.
Absolutely. How do you get to action? Let's bring in the book here, which is releasing on January 6th. Firstly, how did this idea of a book, you had a busy life. You could have had a busy life, happy life, you lost a lot in that whole earlier journey. So you could want to live a life. Why think of a book? And then let's talk about action. What do you mean by action here? People are accomplished, they know about it. Sometimes it's difficult to know what action to take. Do I have to move left, right, front, forward, backward? Where is it?
Well, I would just say is you got to move, right? So sometimes, maybe not backwards, but this is my third book, and I did not set out to write this book. I set out to just kind of look at, where kind of the big moments and the small moments where change happened. I think we overcomplicate change. I think we can overcomplicate growth. And so I spent just some time looking at from those moments in my life that were big to very small moments that, maybe just having coffee with my wife just now. And where can that change and growth happen? And what I came to realize is that really three things happened. One is that, and it's what we call the what if rule. It's really the framework. It's a really simple 3-step. And I'll talk about the simplicity of it in a second, that the first step is to pause, right? You have to interrupt your story. You got to interrupt your thinking. You got to interrupt your day or interrupt the moment. And then the second is to ask a question. And I use what if questions because what if can reframe. And then the third step is go, right? Just go, just move forward. And the simplicity is really vital because once I came up with and I could realize that this is the framework. And what I realized is I'd been using this framework all of my life. I just hadn't identified it, which can really happen to us. And so, okay, I'll write a book called on the what if rule. And then what I realized is, I'm a big believer there's brilliance in simplicity. If it takes 300 pages to explain a framework, then that's not a framework anyone's going to use. So I wrote one chapter on what if moments. I wrote one chapter on the what if rule. And then I wrote 52 chapters of different questions of how to apply it every week, because I think it's about the practice of it. So, it's pause, question, go. Simple as that.
Absolutely. So when you say you are one action away starting today, what does that mean? What is this one action? Means for a lot of people, it can be, quite difficult to know first and then go later.
Yeah, look, I think what happens is that I think one of the challenges we have is that we have routine reactions, right? We have this way that we just think it is. And so what the what if rule and that pause question can do for you is to really reframe it, so I'm a big believer that there's always a different perspective. There's always different options that are available, but we have to really interrupt the moment to find them. And so once we can find them, what can I do differently? I think one of the big things sometimes is that the best action we can do is to just move on, do nothing, right? You're at work and you get the email and, they never call you out by name, but somehow you take it personal. Well, I'm going to tell them, right? And then all of a sudden, the action can just be, it doesn't matter, move on. And sometimes go can mean to respond in a different way. But I think it's about catching ourselves so we can move forward in a different way. And again, this is big and small.
Absolutely. Doug, so who is this book for?
Well, the last book I wrote was called The Day Makes the Year Makes a Life. And it was really about the principles of recovery that I used in business and leadership. And yet this book is really for, I would just say, anyone who would like to be able to move forward in a little different way. And it's not, again, for anyone who's stuck. But, sometimes people will ask, well, is this a workbook? Is this, is this for people at work in their careers? Is this about relationships? Is this, about everyday discussion? And I go, yes, because I think one of the things is, well, we may have work, we may have relationships, we may have parenting, we have all these different parts of our life, but the one constant is what? Us. So I don't, we can look at work and relationships and family and all these different things differently, but the fact is that we carry ourselves through all these moments. So the opportunity to change and grow is the same. So the book is really for anyone who would like to move forward and find that little bit of personal growth and change for happiness, for career, for whatever outcomes and benefits that they would have in continuing to grow.
Absolutely, Doug. So when you say, that this particular rule, the what if rule, it helps people create better perspectives, better options, and better actions in their work and life. How does it create better perspective? How does it work? If I ask what if, how does it create all these things?
Well, and I think maybe, so here's the book. And so I think one of the best ways to answer that is if I just open a chapter, right? So the first 4 or 5 chapters are just a setup. So this is number 29. What if this week you let your actions communicate your gratitude? What if you let your actions communicate your gratitude? And so what I'm doing there is if on a weekly basis, maybe Sunday night, Monday, what have you, or just whenever you feel like growing and just picking up and flipping to a chapter, you can work it through 1 through 52 or whenever one you want. But, this particular one is about interrupting how you think about gratitude. That gratitude, most people think is a feeling, but true gratitude is an action. And so it gives you some story behind it, and then it will give you some different ways to apply that week. And so the reason I use the what if question is that the what if question, I think, starts to open up those new perspectives, right? Most people say, what if looking backwards? Well, what if I hadn't married her, right? What if I hadn't gotten that degree? What if I hadn't bought this house? And it's sometimes full of regret, looking backwards. And instead, when you ask a what if question, it starts to open up and give you those perspective and options. And I think the reason why I really liked about what if is that it opens you up without judgment, because you can also just say, well, it doesn't apply to me. This one perspective is right. Great. But when you look for other perspectives, you'll find other perspectives.
Absolutely. So a person might be having a particular issue, and then he or she wants to find an answer or a question in your book. How does he do that? Means you talked about gratitude. What are the other sort of questions which will help them find answers to their present problem?
Number 19, what if this week you stepped into feelings of being overwhelmed? Right? So overwhelmed usually is overthinking. It's not set up in a way that you go to an index and look for a particular word. And I did that on purpose because I often think that when we think we have a particular issue, that is not the real issue, right? Because if not, it would be like, my wife, my boss, right? And so what I think the most important things to know is you can't change what you don't own. You can't change what you don't own. So, I can't change necessarily how my boss assigns work, but what I can change is how I deal with it so I'm not overwhelmed. And when you have that power, and that was really something that really started learning that in the depths of my addiction and coming out of my addiction is, I had to own everything I had done, the stealing, the lying, the cheating, and I could own it. And that's the only way I could move forward. So whatever is going on, I think that first point is that you just got to own. My friend Steve said this once to me. It was, he said he's 100% responsible for 50% of every relationship. Right. And so typically when we're feeling uncomfortable, whether it's a partner, spouse, boss, friend, kids, right, we're probably not either owning our half enough or we're owning part of theirs. And I can't own any part of theirs.
Absolutely. So how do you use it for yourself now, even though you have written the book, or is it only for others?
Oh, no. Nobody's asked me that question. And that is a great question. And, what I find is that most of the time, so, right, there's two different points we can use this kind of change and growth. One is when I'm feeling discomfort. And, someone's tailgating me. I hate tailgaters, and I use this all the time, right? So I can do something stupid like hit the brakes, which is really not smart. Or I can start to reframe and say, well, what if this person isn't late for work? And what if it has nothing to do with me? And of course it has nothing to do with me. But I actually use it every day. And I will tell you that the other thing that I think is so important is I also do something which I call future journaling. And so each morning I journal, but most people journal about either what happened or what they want to do. I find is one of the most important things I can do is each morning journal about who I want to be. When I set the expectations of who I want to be and I start to get off track a little bit, I'm much more aware of it. And that's when I can then just use the what if to get back into, I want to be a loving husband. I want to be a supportive father. I want to be a good marketer. I want to be a good podcast guest, right? And so when I start off that way, I'm much more likely to achieve it.
Absolutely. One more thing I want to understand. You talk about reframing, and you talk about, how to turn challenges into options. A lot of times we will find options also, answers also. But a lot of times the answer is also about letting go. Will reframing also help us find this answer about letting go? How do we find this answer of letting go when we are only trying to look at things from a new perspective, better perspective? How does one get that? Because that is also important aspect of our life.
Absolutely. And I think that it really starts with understanding that reframing, right, is a mind, is a thought, right? And so it's the actions that are going to change it. And so, I have a little certain thing of how do you let something go, right? You're upset with someone. How do you let it go? And to me, there's kind of two different things. One is I can just say, theirs, not mine. I don't know their actions, right? So that's their stuff. I won't use the word, right? But that's theirs. That's not mine. And the other one is to reframe and then start to do something different. And one of the stories I love to share from the book is there's a woman who, it really was something minor, but it drove her nuts that her husband wouldn't close kitchen cabinet drawers and doors. Every time she came in the kitchen, the door was open. And, and we all have those little things that just drive us crazy. And it started to really get in the way of the relationship because she'd walk into the kitchen and she'd get mad. And so what she did is that whenever she came in the kitchen and her husband had left a cabinet door open, she would go close it. And when she closed it, she thought of something that she liked about her husband. So I think that is I love that example when I heard it or talk about it, because what it did is it took away something that was in the way and started to do something that enhanced and strengthened the relationship. Small thing, but huge when it comes to day-to-day relationships and annoyances.
Absolutely. In life, there are so many things, which pull you towards itself. In your case, you've been sober for 38 years, if I understand, continuous sobriety. You left it. Didn't it ever occur to you, or the question itself come to your mind? What if now I can have it because I have control over myself and there will be no harm now? I have enough success now that nothing will go wrong. Why doesn't that come in your mind? Whereas people who are, sober for some time, they just ask, perhaps, what, nothing will happen. What if I take nothing will happen? Help us understand from different aspects of our life how to only use it in the right manner, not to let it drift us into a wrong way.
Well, I have a little simple way of living my life. I like to think I'm moving towards or away from something at any moment. So I'm either moving towards happiness or I'm moving away from happiness. I'm moving towards more sobriety or less sobriety. I'm moving towards more success or away from more success. And so the idea is I'm never at a point of stillness. And so is the action I'm taking right now and the things I'm doing going to get me closer to that, what I'm seeking? And to me, that is just what keeps me living in the way that I'm living. The other thing is I just try to be very simple. A lot of people talk about being 1% better, and there's some different concepts out there. Maybe I'm not good enough at the math that I can figure out what is 1% better. But what I do know is if each day I set out to just be a little bit better than the day before. And so particular to your question is there's no way that I'm going to be better if I decide to take a drink or a drug or act in a dishonest way or whatever it is that is moving me away from who I want to be, not versus the opportunity of who I can be. When I went to work for Bose, I was first director of retail for Bose Corporation, and Dr. Bose had just built this new building and we moved into it. And I remember sitting in my office going, who doesn't belong here? It's me, right? Because I was just never a guy who thought he could be in that position in such a great company. And, but it's because what I had done on a daily basis, I had no great plans to be there. I just each day tried to be better than I was the day before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in a nutshell, what is it that you would like to tell the world about your framework and anything else associated with that?
But I think I think that if we own our day, we own our actions, there's just, no matter where you're at, if you're happy, you can be happier. If you're not happy with where you're at, you have the power to change that. But it's about, again, is how do I interrupt and how do I, on a daily basis, change the way I see things? And it's so much simpler than we all make it out to be. To change and growth, I don't think is that complicated. Humans were complicated. And so what you'll have my link is I actually have a 44-page excerpt of the book, which actually gives you all the framework chapters in whole. So you can download that immediately at startwithwhatif.com and start to apply it, whether it's big or small.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much to learn about all this from you. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, from your books, also want to get your coaching, speaking, as well as, perhaps get more from you. What's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I would say there's two ways. One is if you go to startwithwhatif.com, because I'd love to get the framework in your hand again at no cost. And that will also put you on my weekly newsletter where I kind of write about a specific area, and it's almost always applies to both business and personal. If you're interested in some coaching and speaking, you can also go to dougfleener.com. But I'd love for you to start with downloading this free book, the free part of the book, and to get the framework to just start to maybe change a little bit of how you think in the moment.
Absolutely. With this, it's set up on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
It was just an honor. Thank you.